And Jay, do you want to move to the next slide? All right, so we have an hour today together. It's going to go by really fast, but we just want to quickly give you some bullet points about what we are going to be covering. So Jay is going to next kind of go through exactly what JCSD is, a little bit of the history and the purpose, and then really diving in deep into the research and brief section of the journal. And then I'll jump in and talk about the responsibilities for reviewers and the mechanics before Jay jumps back in to discuss some foundations of being a reviewer. And then we'll have a discussion, brief discussion about the Stanley article that we sent out. Any questions before we get started though? Delightful. All right.
Isn't it just? Okay, so if your camera's on, would love to know who is familiar with JCSD, who's ever been engaged or been to a session at ACPA or talked with editors. The reason that I love being part of JCSD is it was my first reviewer opportunity with Research and Brief. It was actually my first publishing opportunity with Research and Brief. It was my most recent publishing with Research and Brief, because I think that this specific venue really speaks to intersectional justice and liberation that other higher ed journals are continuing to strive for, as we are. JCSD has been in existence since 1959, and we are indexed with the Social Science Index. My colleagues from Alabama, when I worked there, did an article examining the different HESA journals, and you may know some big names like JCSD, of course, the Journal of Higher Ed, Review and Research of Higher Ed, and more recently, I would also put in the Journal of Diversity in Higher Ed as having acceptance rates anywhere from like 5 to 8%, which is typical for JCSD as of now as well. JCSD has 4 sections. Basti is the editor and oversees features. And then Abelia, Sherry, and I each oversee different sections. I, of course, oversee Research and Brief with Larry as my fierce partner in everything that we do together. And I also recently took over translational education research. And so at the end, of course, we're going to be talking about Research and Brief. Will you have any questions as a potential author or someone who's interested, especially in Research and Brief and translational education research? Feel free to ask us. We love talking about it. We're a cross-disciplinary journal. I would say that a lot of our submissions are from, of course, higher education and education broadly. From human development, we get a lot of psychology, especially clinical psychology submissions from folks. And then other disciplines like business, critical area studies, and sociology, of course, nursing, sometimes business and health sciences. We are primarily an empirical journal, and we primarily publish qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods, historical, and other empirical methods. On occasion, we do publish conceptual, theoretical, or practice-oriented pieces. Our focus largely is on the college student experience. Of course, we're home to a lot of development-driven scholarship and scholarship focus on the profession of student affairs. Okay, so Research and Brief is in many ways very similar to the scholarly, methodological, conceptual, theoretical, epistemological expectations for feature manuscripts, except it's just Honey, I Shrunk the Manuscript, and instead of 30 pages, it's 9 pages. So it is similar expectations for continuity between theoretical constructs, implications for the profession, and methodological expectations as feature manuscripts. It's just a shorter way of doing that. As you may know, Research and Briefs are 9 pages inclusive of everything. That includes tables, figures, and references. Research and Brief does not require abstracts, though, so that doesn't count in the overall word count. Because Research in Brief is 9 pages, there are often focuses that lend themselves to an abbreviated manuscript format. We get a lot of submissions that are pieces speaking to methodologists, methodological pieces, in particular, survey validation, instrument development. Sometimes we get cool things like avant-garde research approaches like arts-based inquiry, and the audience is methodologists informing education scholars about new methods. That's one of my favorite submissions to receive, because as a quantitative queer myself, being able to tap into a methods audience in a 9-page format, it's real trim and real informative. Of course, we do get empirical studies. Whereas, the Journal of Higher Ed allows 10,000 words, and feature manuscripts in the Journal of College Student Development allow 30 pages. With 9 pages, folks often with empirical pieces either take a thematic lens. So let's say there's this gorgeous multimodality qualitative study. Rather than presenting 7 rich themes, someone may pull out 1 or 2 rich themes and really do a deep dive into that. Other times I've seen with great dexterity folks having a sample in phenomenology, for example, of 5 to 12 people. Maybe with a Research in Brief, you pull out someone who has an exceptional journey through that phenomenon and you really highlight one person's story. Or perhaps in a quantitative study, rather than doing a series of 3 different regression analyses for 3 different outcomes, you may either instead do one of those regressions, or you may choose to do a simple structural equation model to really do a 10,000-foot view of the concepts empirically as they relate to each other. On very, very rare occasions, very small occasions, we sometimes do publish what we call campus intervention pieces. And these focus on a specific program or initiative or some unique context about a college intervention that's worth exploring. And I'll go into that a little bit about my own personal priorities with the journal, but those are often passed through with favorable reviews when there's something unique about the institutional context or the specific campus intervention that really hasn't been touched in the literature that much. Okay, I think this is a good chance to just pause for a second. We have a good hour, right, Larry? So I don't want to blitz through this too much. We just gave kind of a broad overview to the journal and to Research in Brief. Feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand if you have a question. And while folks are thinking of questions, feel free to type in the chat just some ponderings that are coming up for you. What are you thinking about? What manuscripts do you think would really gravitate towards this? What methodological workings are you considering right now? What do you do for your own research? Take just a second to foster some community and shared understanding of ourselves in the chat feature. And while everyone else is typing, if you have a question, feel free to raise your actual hand or your Zoom hand, and we're happy to answer it. Great question. We do often get international submissions for Research in Brief. And whether that's overseen by Avelia in the international section or by me is sometimes Larry's decision. And it's often led by whether it's a quantitative study and it'll usually go to me, or if it's a qualitative study and it goes to Avelia. Just kind of leaning into our strengths as an editorial leadership team.
And sometimes who just has less on their plate.
Yeah, yeah. Agree. Oh, Danny, yes. I will sing through the rafters the joy and power of basic inferential and descriptive statistics, especially for policy reformation in education. So yeah, would love to see more of those. I would also love to see more data visualizations in Research and Brief. Like a really nice opportunity to just to have like a story that's contained in a short sound bite. Heck yeah, would love to see PAR or visual methods, kind of like a methodological commentary. Absolutely.
And I would also throw out there that if you want to see it, we would love to have you submit it.
Mhm.
For, admittedly, we have had fewer submissions to the RIB section of the journal in the last couple of years, and we would really love any thoughts or input on how to change that and how to get more folks to submit. And that also includes, you still have the opportunity to do that.
There's a lot of reasons why you may have chosen to be on the Research and Brief board. For me, when I joined, it was my first reviewer opportunity. And it was also my first opportunity to kind of like look behind the curtain of the publication process. And I want that for you. And I'm going to be very explicit in saying, I really hope, because you're all engaged reviewers, that you yourself will submit something to Research and Brief, as Larry said. And candidly, I'm here for you. Y'all are my A number ones. And so if you as an author want to talk to us, we're very much here as well to talk through ideas with you. Which is exactly how I got my first publication opportunity through this. So you can tell like it's a very lived experience for me with Research and Brief. Okay, I'm going to move on.
Okay, great. So I'm going to discuss some of the responsibilities that you'll have as an RIB reviewer. So this PowerPoint, I might say that in reality, probably 8 manuscripts a year would be the most that you would actually be assigned, not 10 or 12. We have really expanded the RIB board in the last few years. It's really good for authors. We can move through the production process quicker with more RIB reviewers. So every manuscript is assigned 2 reviewers, and that's overseen by Jay and I. When you are assigned a manuscript, you'll receive an email and you'll have 30 days. I think it gives you 30 days to agree to take it on, or to say, you know what, this is just outside of my wheelhouse, or I just do not have time for that right now. I'm also just going to take a pause to say, if at any, this is a 3-year commitment, and what could happen to your life in 3 years? So many things. So, if you move, you have a baby, you're trying to get a promotion, you're really working really hard on something else, you are always welcome to reach out to us and say, hey, I really need a break. Oh, you're dissertating. Just let us know, and really let me know, and I can just put a note in your account, and I can just pause you from being able to be assigned manuscripts for that given period of time. Just as an FYI, we know you have other things to do besides RIB, but we do really appreciate the work that you do for us. All right, so if you do accept, we would like you to complete your review within 30 days. So keep that in mind as you're making that decision. Now, if you say, yes, I'm going to do this, and you never submit it, or you just don't respond to our initial email, the computer system will send you 2 auto-generated emails. I think sometimes, depending on somebody's institution's IT team, those messages may go to spam, they may not. But if we notice that you've had those two messages, either Jay or I will reach out to you in kind of a personalized email, kind of explaining what's up and asking you to either finish or let us know where you're at. Confidentiality is so important to the work that we do. We take a lot of effort to put to make this a blind process. So you will not know who has submitted the piece, and we really don't want you to try to figure out who wrote the piece either. And we would really love it if you could just kind of keep your discussions about the work to yourself, and not be sharing sharing the work that you're reviewing with others outside of this circle. Does that make sense? Any questions about that?
Larry?
Yeah, Katie.
If it does seem very obvious who the author is because perhaps they've workshopped their stuff with us before, is there a process to say, I feel like there's a conflict here, I don't feel comfortable reviewing this piece?
Yes, you just go ahead and let Jay and I know. And we'll switch that back. And there's and just as an FYI, if you tell your friends that you're on the IRB board, they can also upfront say, hey, I know Katie, please don't send this to her. So there's like a space for them to identify people that are maybe like tight in their circle. Jay, you look like you have something.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. Katie, I'm like a small instance. You may be like the only one who can do this review. So I might say, duly noted, can you be unbiased in this review and hold confidentiality? So look out for those, like, on very rare occasions, me needing to tap you as like the one.
I think that's only happened once in the
Yeah.
last in the 2.5 years.
Just when we really need it.
Yeah. But I think we have this nice bigger board now, so that could be really helpful. But that's a great question. That's a great question. Jay, could you move on to the next slide? And feel free, as we're going on, feel free to just interrupt me because I know my part is more technical. So I added you all to the system about an hour before, around 3 o'clock today. So you all now have the power to start getting manuscripts assigned to you. This I should probably update this slide. So I would really like you all, I noticed when I was adding reviewing powers in the system, I looked at the areas of research methodologies and interests that you marked as knowledgeable about. Some of you, great, had really long lists, and that's great. And some of you had really teeny tiny lists. And I want to, and Jay, please jump in here. Jay will assign you manuscripts based on those, based on your areas of interests and the methodologies that you're familiar with. So if you only have case studies and ethnography listed, for example, given the nature of RIB, it would be unlikely that you would be receiving very many manuscripts to review. We would really encourage you to really think about, what has your doctoral work trained you in? Those are the areas that you may be actually okay at as a reviewer. If there are functional areas of student affairs that you did a practicum in, that you interned or worked, those would be areas to add. So the kind of the thicker that description is, the more accurate we can assign you manuscripts. Jay, please jump in.
That was such a good description. I think about it like this. Has anyone ever taught a graduate class or been a guest lecturer in a graduate class before? So like, think about reviewing assignments. There's things that I myself can't write about, but I feel qualified enough to give feedback to one of my peers or a student. So when you're making your list, if I was to make the list about myself, it would only be queer stuff and quant stuff, and that would be 1 out of 100 submissions, and I wouldn't get that many reviews. It's always so sad when people are so excited to join. They enter 3 areas of expertise and don't get a review for a year because the system works. I click a button, people who have specialty in, ANOVA, and then everyone who clicks that's the only list that I use to select who will review that article. So be generous, because you all are very skilled in your methods and topics and community specific focuses with what you have the potential to review. And if you're ever like, I got reviewed this assigned by Jay, and you're like, this is just so out of my wheelhouse, feel free to email us. I might say, it is. That's exactly why I chose you, because we need an outside perspective.
Yeah, there's two parts to, I think, the editors assigning people manuscripts. One part is methodology and one part is content. So you might be really good at narrative inquiry and have marked that, and you get a manuscript about student athletes, but you know nothing about student athletes other than your own experience. You can really concentrate on the methods portion and really really share that, because remember, you're not the only one giving feedback. There's going to be 2 folks there. This email right here, you should have that in your email. I've been communicating with you through that. I check my email every day. I'm a workaholic. I'm bad. It's also just nicer than like actually doing schoolwork. It's responding to your emails. So please, if at any point you ever have a question, I probably will get back to you within 2 days. And then I'd also just suggest that you actually bookmark the editorial manager website. And I can send that out over email also, so you don't have to worry about that too much. Any mechanical questions to the website? I think it's a pretty straightforward website, but sometimes folks can feel like it looks a little too like 1992. So if you ever need some one-on-one assistance or you have general questions right now, just reach out. No, okay, maybe 2002, Gabrielle. All right, Jay, you want to? All right. Well, I think I described some of this already. So yes, I said that part. Be open. Oh, yeah, I'm just kind of like skip to this 3rd bullet point here. Once review is complete, please click submit. It's really common, you're doing your review, you get it done, you think it's all done, you click save, and then when you hit save, it just sticks with you. Jay and I don't see it. We think you're just working on it and you're taking a really long time. So if you want us to see it, you're going to need to hit the submit button. Oh, and there are some folks who just rolled off. Ordinarily, if a piece is assigned to somebody and then that piece is sent out for revisions, we really try to assign that manuscript right back to the person who gave the original feedback. Sometimes that's just not possible because folks roll off and because we just want to be flexible with you. So you may get a manuscript that somebody else had an initial review on. You're going to receive all of the initial review that folks have given, and we'd ask you to strongly consider that as your giving feedback back for a 2nd round revision. This kind of gets tricky, and if this happens and you feel confused by the notes that we've given you, please feel free to reach out to Jay, and he'll be really helpful in kind of clarifying that process. Questions?
I just want to give a hypothetical timeline because for those of you who are on the review board for the first time, this is your first journal service. Sometimes I wondered, like, what is taking 3 to 4 months to have a decision made on my manuscript? And so Larry and I, well, maybe I'll speak for myself. I usually do my editor work once a week. And so there's a few days there. I will send out an invitation to authors. And sometimes folks don't get back for like a month about whether or not they agree to do a review. Do you know that like guilt of sitting on something and then it's in your inbox and you feel like it's creating a cavity in your mouth because it's been there for so long, and then you're like, oh, well, the window has passed. I might as well just keep it there for the rest of my career because there's nothing I'm going to be able to do about it. Really the most important time frame is saying yes or no to doing a review. We don't like you to say no very often because unless you indicate that you're not available and we assigned you something by accident. But don't let it stay in your inbox and making a decision, because then we have to go back to the drawing board and re-invite someone. And then we give folks enough time to do a review, and folks may have a delayed review. And so, it's like this sequence. If it gets out of lock and step, it really throws off the timing. And then we have an author who's not had a decision for 4 to 6 months, which makes me feel terrible when that happens. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? You may have been on that side as an author before, right? So especially with the timeline that Larry overviewed, saying yes or no to a review is really, in my opinion, the most important step to maintaining timeliness.
There's another question. Is the 30 days acceptance? This is the question. I think it's 30 days from the time you receive that email, that the system will count it as wanting to be completed in 30 days from the day that you get the initial email invitation. And if that doesn't work, if you need 35 days, if you need 36 days, you can work with us. It is pretty common for folks to start, especially with featured articles, to start a review and then realize, hold on, I need a few days to think about this and go back to it, or something else has kind of come up. But the quicker you can complete the process, the quicker we can send feedback back to the author.
Yeah, thanks for that, Larry. I was wondering, if we get the invite to review and it kind of sits there for, say, 15 days and then we accept it, then do we only have 15 days to review it, or does that 30-day kind of clock start once we have accepted? I don't know if maybe my question, the way that I typed it, didn't.
No. I think that the system will still think, if you accept it, that you have 15 days.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
The system will begin sending you it'll send you 2 auto emails once I think 2 days before you're about to be done and 2 days after you're due. But if you're working on it, it's fine. Okay. I think that the next slide is the slide that everybody is really wants to know about. Or the slide that I know that we get a lot of questions about. So working with Jay has really been amazing the last couple of years, because he really does try to lead with kindness and integrity. And so I think that we are like laying out essentially this rubric in front of you about what we think an accept is, what a revise and submit is, and a reject. I think a way to think about that, and even with this rubric in front of you, it might just be challenging to kind of think about when should you accept an article versus suggest that it get rejected. I think that the best way to think about this is Imagine that this person is your best friend from class and they've come and they've asked you to read their very final paper for a class that they've been struggling in, and they want your honest feedback on it. So would you tell this person, whoa, you wrote the wrong assignment? Or would you tell them, this is great. You kind of really need to flush this part out here and there. Or would you tell this person, wow, turn this in, the professor's going to love it. You might want to check your grammar a little bit, but it's all good. I see that there's some things in the chat. Oh, that's great. Great question, Emily. Jay, jumping in here as the editor, do you have any other words to kind of share about this?
Sometimes I have so many thoughts. First of all, there's always a home for a manuscript, even if it may not be with JCSD. And so we are stewards of the field. And so there's nothing territorial about recommending other publications if you think it's a better fit somewhere. The second thing is, sometimes when I started reviewing, I got a little overzealous and I thought everything, I think everyone and everything has potential to succeed. It's just kind of like my ethos in life. And so I'm like, if we do something with this, we can make it work. As much as I would like that to be a philosophy of journal submissions, it's not feasible because we can only publish a certain amount of manuscripts. So a good audit to do for yourself, maybe in half a year, is to take a look back and see how many did I recommend for a revise and resubmit? And is it really balanced and in alignment with what Jay would expect of me? And as we mentioned before, 1 out of 10 manuscripts or fewer is eventually published. So that's kind of just a helpful jumping off point, because I know a lot of us see merit and potential in everyone and everything, but not everything can be published.
And ultimately, there will be somebody else also making recommendations, and Jay is going to have time to look at both of those before making a decision. So you're contributing to the decision. You're not making the full decision. That weight is not necessarily on your shoulders.
The next few slides are going to be a little bit more subjective. So if you have any like processing or mechanical questions, now's a really good time to ask them before we get into more interpretive thoughts.
I'm just an email away.
On occasion, I also get emails from reviewers who are like, hey, I just reviewed this and you gave a decision. I'm surprised at your decision. Can you explain it to me? And I'm okay with doing that, especially for new folks on the review board. If you're confused about why, you gave it a strong revise and resubmit and I rejected it, I would love to have that conversation with you with a lot of transparency. Happy to do that. Good question, Emily. If you accept too much, hard for me to keep track because there's like 60 folks. So it's probably more on you to do that audit. With that being said, I probably get about 5 reviewers a year who are like, this is so new for me. I'd just like to do a check-in. And we can have a Skype date and just talk about your recent history of reviews. I even like pull up your comments and I'm like, here's what was helpful. Here's what wasn't really helpful for me as an editor. I think that's especially great to do with peers. This is why we do this, because we want a community of practice. So I encourage you to do that with your peers. And if you don't have anyone to do that with, I'm here for that.
Jay, I have a mechanics bit that I am realizing that I forgot. When you do when you are doing your reviews, the system does have a scale. It has a number scale that it's going to ask you to complete. Don't worry about it. We don't use it. We only use your narrative feedback. So the system just has this feature to have you rank everything on a scale of 1 to 10. It's just a feature we can't get rid of. Jay will not look at that, even if you put something in there. He is just going to be making his decisions based on what you have written about the manuscript, which also could just be in bullet points as an FYI. It doesn't have to be paragraphs.
Cool. I might bring this up later, but now that I'm thinking of it, there's two different boxes for your comments. One is comments to the author, and then another is confidential comments that only I will see. I'm going to triple underscore this. This could be the most important thing I say this entire time. Those confidential comments to editors are my favorite thing, because if you can succinctly be like, it's these two things that need a lot of work, it's so helpful for me as I write a summative review. Now, I'd love for you to write 3/4 of a page, 1.5 pages of feedback to the authors. Hell yes. But having like 2 or 3 succinct things is like chef's kiss for me. It is everything I can hope for and more. It's the most helpful part of a reviewer's comments. Okay. So Larry and I kind of overviewed some of this stuff, but I just want to hit home again. The reason I'm in this profession is because of love and solidarity, and that's why I agreed to be an editor. Kindness will always be my guiding light, especially in reviewer responsibilities, because anonymity can kind of breed discomfort or sometimes resentment and insecurities. It has for me in the past as an author who's received reviewer comments. So even though it can feel arduous at times, would love for you to include things that have great merit in pieces. Would love for you to exercise kindness. Some folks also name their positionality, namely their social identities or professional experiences that guided their review. And if you feel so inclined to do that, I welcome that. Just remember there's this weird balance of anonymity and confidentiality. So don't disclose a very specific aspect of yourself, but if you want to have like a broad bucket, that is very welcomed. Every piece has potential, even if it's not with JCSD. So remember that we're constructive and community-centered in all the feedback that we give. There may be times when you're like, oh, I would have done this sampling approach very differently, and I think this is a flaw in your manuscript. That's not how we should approach reviews. That you should be evaluating them on the decisions that they made and the study present. There's sometimes, you know, as a quant scholar, I sometimes feel like there's this weird like methods flexing sometimes, like people want like one-up personship and to be like, actually, you should have done da-da-da-da-da. There's no point in that because you're anonymous, so there's no flex. There's no one you're talking to. You are completely anonymous in this. So just be kind and constructive in your feedback. Having clear insights is really helpful, and that can mean a few things. It may be, some people do line by line. So on line ... you said this needs to be clearer. Or it may be something like you used passive voice a lot in this one section, and I encourage you to ascribe ownership to people by using first person voice or something like that. And as Larry said before, I basically determine my decisions based on your feedback. And ultimately it's the editorial leadership's decision in what we will decide. So if you have any questions about our decisions, we're always happy to talk about it. Larry, did I miss anything? Okay. Some things that really help me when I'm doing a review is the storyline clear? And is it consistent throughout? Does it tell a compelling story? And is there an identified audience, and are they speaking to that audience? Does the literature review build the so what of the story so that the methods and the question is really illustrative? Do the findings add to practice and policy and scholarship in higher ed and student affairs? Like, is there an importance of this? Is there a this we need to publish this now moment? And like, don't feel like you have to do line by line copy editing, because that is done later. Unless there's some portion that isn't as readable or legible, then you might want to be like, I encourage you to read this aloud and maybe rephrase some of these because you're losing your meaning. Okay, so I'm wicked transparent in this role, and there's some priorities that I unabashedly uplift because I have positional privilege in this role. So when I'm making decisions, there's kind of like 3 dimensions that I consider. And the first is importance of the topic, particularly given the white dominance in our field and in development scholarship and in JCSD. I want to see that scholarship is uplifting BIPOC communities or anti-racist work. Is it timely and relevant, as I mentioned before, to a specific policy or practice, or with whom are you in conversation? Does it contribute new knowledge? And this is so important for me. There has to be a clear audience identified, or it feels just like a ship without a rudder. Like, there has to be an audience, especially with a 9-page research and brief. You have to know who you're talking to. Regarding rigor, are complex, sophisticated, and appropriate methods being used? With quantitative work, is it broadly generalizable? Does it demonstrate trends? With qualitative work, is there a deep dive, or is there a breadth? Is it really capturing what the author wants to? And then campus interventions, I would expect it to be contextualized in a rich overview of the site so we know how to apply it to other institutional contexts, especially given the dominance of historically white 4-year research institutions in higher ed research or JCSD. And then finally, presentation. I want a good storyline that makes sense, that's enjoyable to read, that is understandable, that all the requisite components of a manuscript are included, which is challenging sometimes, but it is an expectation, even though it's 9 pages. And then finally, does it conform to the 9-page limit? But Larry will turn a manuscript back if it doesn't conform to that, so you likely won't find that very often. Before I go on, are there any questions or comments about my priorities that you have as either a reviewer or an author?
I have a question about the quantitative generalizability.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm Tano. So does it mean, let's say I think like in general, like RIV tended to have a small sample size compared to, I don't know, it's my impression. And then does it mean like if the papers, has the data collected maybe only from one institution, for example, or maybe 2 or 3, and sample size like a 200, then in that case, like basically we are supposed to reject because, right, like a generalizability issue can appear like if we have such a small sample size from like a small institution. So I just want to make sure that part.
What a great question. So I study queer and trans communities, and sometimes my sample with structural equation modeling only has 120 people, and that's fine. I also think generalizability is a tool of white supremacy, and that's a whole nother conversation to be had about quantitative methods and the fallacy of generalizability. With that being said, though, a lot of the fatal flaws that I see with this is folks primarily in psychology who only survey a Psych 101 class, and it's a population of convenience. And so they're speaking broadly to all college students in the United States, for example, but it's really only 200 first-year students who are at a Research One institution. So if on a rare occasion there is a particularly important institutional type, I recently had a school, an ANAPC school, that was the focus of a quantitative study. And that was really special because we don't often get studies that focus on the mission of ANAPCs. And so that was something that I would let slide a little bit as a single study institution. There's also, I pay keen attention to sampling demographics. And so if someone submits something about campus sexual assault, for example, and 95% of the respondents are white cisgender straight women, I'm going to question the broad application of those results. So it's like very contextual and there's no absolute answer, but it goes back to like, is this a story that needs to be told that hasn't been told as often? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.
A question too, just, well, a comment more so, because I think sometimes I try to address generalizability in more of a like a limitation caution section. So I think it's not to, may not be so much that they address it or discuss if it's generalizable, but more so address how it may or may not be. So I think that's where that conversation could come up as well. I think for articles, because that's how I think of it, is I study Black STEM students, and so I can't have 6,000, like it's just not possible sometimes to have a whole sample of Black STEM students. So I think as long as they kind of address how it branches out, I think that may be where the conversation can go as well. So just putting my thoughts out there.
I love that. And I think it really also reinforces just like, I guess the phrase I'm thinking of is like staying in your lane. So like only make implications for the study, the population that you're studying. You know what I mean? Yeah, great example. Thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate you. All right. Okay. So I'm
We
such a
have a
talker.
really short amount of time.
I know. Okay. Larry and I sent out an article that we often refer back to in setting our priorities as an editorial leadership team. It's by Stanley and was written in 2007. And it's importance of counter narratives in editorial leadership and journal reviews. And I think as a team, we are stewards of this mission. And we just want to be really transparent that dominant norms that we may have been taught or assumptions that we may have about what is deserving of being published really shapes how we give feedback. And we are all in an important role for being opportunity providers. And it is not without mission and impact that our decisions should be made. So really want us to embrace whatever might be the new horizon for JCSD and not lean on assumptions of what we think the journal has been and should be in the past. As you review manuscripts, would love for you to check in with yourself or with others or with me about how you are problematizing fairness or neutrality or what Stanley considers colorblindness in the review process, to be more explicit in your aims and impact for institutional and societal transformation as a goal through written scholarship. I know we don't have that much time, but I just want to take a pause for a second and invite folks to write in the chat what role justice and liberation plays in your editorial leadership on this board, and what responsibility you consider yourself having in your role as a reviewer. So as you're pondering, I'll say it again. How can we embrace counter narratives as reviewers? And what role do we consider justice and liberation playing in our respective roles for JCSD?
And can I just ask a question about that, Jay?
Yeah.
Do you mean sort of specifically the role we play, or just the role that the review process plays, or both?
Good question. Let's have like some introspective moments. Would love to hear from your lens. And so for me, for example, as a quant scholar, I feel a lot of solidarity with quant scholars who do identity-based research. And I want to make sure it reaches the aims of the intended audience, which is namely policymakers and administrators, to creating more just quantitative research. That might be an example, Norma, that I'm thinking of. Mm. Y'all, these are really good. Really appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, it's almost like somebody should write an IRB about them.
We're gonna have a collective piece of all 30 of us writing an RIB together. Whoever does the formatting can be first author. I'm gonna move on. Some just technical things. First of all, you are very welcome to list this service on your CV. Just remember that you are the Research and Brief Review Board, which is different from the JCSD Editorial Board. And if at any point you have to tap out, whether it's for a month or for its entirety, just let me and Larry know, and we'll note that in the system. And we're here for you with a lot of love and support and community and solidarity. So we love hearing from you, and it's never a burden. So if you have any questions as a reviewer or a potential author, that's why we love doing this work. So always feel free to reach out.
And this next year at ACPA is going to be the first time that we get to have a social gathering with the RIB folks and the editorial board folks at the same time. We are really looking forward to it. I hope, Alexa, stop. I don't know what that was about, but I'll figure out where I'm supposed to be soon. Anyways, we hope that I hope to meet a lot of you at ACPA if I haven't met you already, and you know, have a great rest of your 2022.
It's 5 o'clock, so we're gonna call it a day. But Larry,